A very good evening to you. Welcome to the show. My name is Alex McPhail, and I'm thrilled to bring you today's guest. Gideon Langeveld, a mentor, a friend, a colleague, a leader, instructor, float plane extraordinaire. Stay tuned. Exciting stuff ahead. Gideon, great to see you. How are you doing today in Frankfurt?
Hello, Alex. Yeah, fine, thanks. Thank you very much.
How was your
We
flight?
flew in this morning.
Yeah.
And when we left Cape Town last night, we had maximum zero fuel weight, maximum structural weight, and we landed here this morning at max landing weight. So I think we could have made some money there.
Oh, good. I'm sure there were some very happy people with their repatriations getting themselves back home again. You guys are doing a good job. Looking forward to seeing you in a couple of days' time. But Gideon, for those who don't know you, you've got a very rich and diverse and interesting history. You've had many wonderful conversations at all hours of the day or night. We've flown together on the Boeing 737-200, the 737-300, the Airbus 330, the Airbus 340, the Airbus 350. I've been your student, I've been your co-pilot, I've been a competition on the racetrack, and we've been in the same team on the racetrack. For those who don't know you, start from the beginning. As an 18-year-old, 20-year-old, when you joined the Air Force, where did it all begin for you?
Well, yes, Air Force. My brother was already a pilot in the airline when I was still finishing with school. And I thought that I would take my own direction and maybe go and study something. And so I first of all started with my national service. I went to the Army, and I was an infantryman for a year and a half. And then halfway through my first year, my sister-in-law actually convinced me to do the thing that I always wanted to do as a kid, and also join the flying. So I applied for training in the Air Force, and I was lucky enough to be accepted, and the rest is history.
Well, we're going to get to that history just now. Gideon, there's lots to talk about. So you were selected as a fighter pilot, and fast forwarding a little bit, flying the Aermacchi MB326, you find yourself in the bush, and at quite a young age, you end up with quite a senior responsibility as the flight commander of Impala flight in the bush. And this is no Mickey Mouse 3-4 weeks in and out. You spend a whole year, move your whole family there. Tell us about that, the time in the bush there, flying Impalas, looking after a band of brothers. There's a whole bunch of pilots there. It's difficult times. Talk us through how you ran that team.
Yeah, it was special times. We had 10 aeroplanes. I had 7 pilots, and there were 48 ground crew with us. But they were not really in my team. They were the technical on the technical side. So they were not really under me, but they worked as a support staff for us. Okay. So it was fantastic.
Big time. And I know you had, so let's just get some of these pictures out here. People like to see the pictures. I'm going to put a picture up now that you shared with me. That's you sitting on the ejection seat of the Mark II. And there is Miss South Africa. Tell us how that thing played out.
Well, sometimes these celebrities used to come up to wish us well and to support the troops and get the morale up a little bit. And that was just a picture that I had from my Impala days. And that's, I think it was Janine Botpile. She came to visit us. And so I was sitting there and showing her my office.
Very nice. Well, I'm sure it did work. Nice to have the pretty ladies around. So Gideon, so at the end of the war, you've spent a chunk of time there. You've established yourself as a leader. People have respected you. They've worked with you. They've enjoyed the way you operate, and you share the work around with the people that are willing and keen. And that coincided with the end of your time in the Air Force. The war ended, back to the squadron, and that was when you started making your move. So what was your transition from the Air Force into the civvy world like?
Yeah, you're right. So when Resolution 435 of the United Nations stopped us to flying above a certain latitude, we actually moved the command post to from Ondangwa to Grootfontein, and it was there for just a short while, and we realized that this is the end of it. So we packed up and we came back to the States. Well, we called the Republic the States, and we did actually, and and then back to 4th Squadron, and there I just had to wait for my cheetah course. And when halfway through that transition, I realized that I think it's time for me to move on. So I had to resign from the Air Force to put in my bid to apply by the airline, and I was very lucky to get in there as well.
Okay, I know you had a bit of a short transition. Was it one day unemployed?
Exactly. Yeah. That's it's a blessing. Only been unemployed for one day, and that was because the 1st of October 1989 was a Sunday, and we started with SA on the 2nd of October.
Okay, so it's just a technicality. All right, so you get yourself settled in as an airline pilot. You've got an older brother who's about 10 years ahead of you in the airline. You've got a bit of a familiarity with the airline, and now, you know, within a couple of years, as it's quite common with the breed of SAA pilots, we start getting excited about some other things, little aeroplanes and fun things, and general aviation starts tickling your fancy. So tell us how you got involved in the GA side of things.
Yeah, so when I started in the airline, it was as a boy pilot on classic jumbos, and from there I moved on to the 737-200s, and then shortly after that I got an opportunity to relocate to Cape Town, and so I flew the 737 there for 3 years, and I was about 7 years in the airline when I went. I was lucky enough to get a position on the 747-400, and during those times, I actually during that phase, we did a lot of flying to Miami, and we spent like 4 nights in Miami because we were waiting for the next airplane to come so that we can take it home. And during that phase, I thought, well, what shall I do with my time? And I always wanted to do something interesting like seaplane flying, so I did that. I started with went to Brown Seaplane Base, started flying seaplanes, and from there I decided to do an ATP, an American ATP, and I did that also on multi-engines seaplane.
Okay, so let me put a little clip up there for the folk to see. This is a very recent clip. You're taxiing in the last part of your seaplane flight, and recently went into Miami again.
Yeah, that. Just give a hand. Can I talk?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so that's at Brown Seaplane Base, which is in Winter Haven in Florida. It's like in central Florida, just to the south of Kissimmee, and it's where these guys have had a school for many, many years. They were actually quite friendly with Richard Bach as well, and on a later photograph that you've got there, Richard Bach's house will be in the background.
There it is. Okay. So tell us the story about this here. This is the same lake that we saw a minute ago?
Yeah, that's it's Lake Jesse and that's really where these guys, the Browns, hang out.
Okay, and is this the base kind of aeroplane that you would use if anyone wants to go to a float plane rating? You'd go on this Cub with floats.
Yeah, you know, sometimes they've got other aeroplanes there. They might have a Maul or maybe a Cessna, a little Cessna, or a Taylorcraft or something like that. And when I did my my ATP, I did on a United Consultants 2B, which is a very interesting aeroplane. It's really an awkward-looking thing. It was a contraption that they built using the Republic CV as a base. They took the pusher engine at the back off, lengthened the fuselage, lengthened the wings a little bit, and then put 2 tractors on the front. And
okay, so that's what you started flying, and I know you've taken a lot of people out there. You've exposed a lot of people to float planes, and particularly Brown's seaplane base, and you continue to go there regularly to keep up the water landings. Just tell us a little bit, if we can just pause there, the difference between a float plane and an amphibian. Is there much distinction there?
Okay, so I know you said I'm a float plane pilot. I'm actually a seaplane pilot. So a seaplane pilot is the collective noun. So you get boats and amphibians and float planes. And some floats are also amphibian. So you can have wheels that come out from the floats, or you can have just straight floats, or you can have actually a boat hull, which like a Catalina and the the Twin B and the B and the Canadair 215, that type of thing. It's a boat.
Okay.
But the collective is a seaplane.
Seaplane. All right. Sorry for that. We'll get all the details as we go along, and I'm hoping that one day we will take it to one more aircraft type, and you give me my seaplane rating. Looking forward to that in the States one day. Okay. So, do you need to start anywhere, or does it not really matter to get a seaplane rating? It could be on a float, it could be on an amphibian. Doesn't make a difference.
No, I just did it on a cub. You know what? A cub is such a fantastic little machine. I mean, you've got to love it. And to do that on floats, it's even better. But
more better.
So, more better, yes. But you'll get some people that start flying on floats. They've never flown on land planes, and they start on floats. It's like, I suppose you get helicopter pilots that never flew fixed wing, and the same thing.
Okay,
but,
sure. Makes sense. All right, so it's a bit of a discipline, and there's a couple of spaces in between with different types of landing. Okay, let's just share this little video here again. We've got another one. We're going to talk a little bit about seaplanes, and here's a takeoff in a Catalina. This was in France a couple of years ago. All the links on the descriptions to find these videos. It's getting airborne. It's got a lot of water spraying all over the place now, and slowly the water just subsides, and you can see there's a rapid acceleration of the aeroplane, but still in contact with the water. And there it starts to peel away from the surface of the water now. Lots of water still spraying off it as it gets airborne. I'm sure that's just it's been engulfed in the wheel wells, etc. So tell us a bit about that sort of takeoff profile. I mean, I know you didn't see that video now, but you're very familiar. That's the Catalina. We'll come to the detail of the Catalina shortly, but just seaplanes, on the water, getting faster, getting airborne, etc.
Right. So typically, you'll see that it's got those short little floats on the wingtips. Now, those floats don't really touch the water. Okay. They will, because they'll probably break off if they do touch the water during the takeoff run. But what they're there for is if the airplane comes to a standstill and wants to settle, it settles on one float. Otherwise, it'll probably sink because the wing will run full of water and so on. But so to do this takeoff, you will position into wind. The aeroplane will naturally turn into wind. So you'll have to taxi quite a way so you've got enough water so that you can actually get the aeroplane off on that. So the airplane will weathercock into wind, and that's what you want, because you want the lowest possible speed over the water, because drag adds exponentially with the speed, or increases exponentially as your speed increases. Sure. Anyway, so you want the lowest possible speed in the water while you've got the maximum amount of speed over the airflow over the wings, okay. And then you'll open the taps. You'll just apply thrust. The Catalina levers are at the top, and you'll just slowly and surely just walk them open. That's what old Charlie Clemens used to say to me: walk them open like this, because you don't want them to backfire or to not be happy there. And eventually they will take, and you'll apply power. What you'll do with the stick is you'll keep the stick as far back as possible. Probably you'll have serious amount of aileron into to try and lift that sponson out of the water as quickly as possible. Okay. And get the wings to fly, and then the aeroplane will just through the thrust application and the fact that you've got the stick back. It'll want to pitch up. The nose wants to pitch up, and so you'll wait for that. And then, as the airplane plows through the water, like a big mass of water will build up in front of the plane. Sure. And as it actually gets enough speed to lift over that or onto that wave, that's like a second lift. and then from there on you can ease the stick forward, and the aeroplane should climb on the step, much like a speedboat.
Sure.
And then you get it on the step with as little as possible a drag, and then you fly it off.
Okay, so as you were describing it there, I'm sitting there picturing me sitting in my boat with the family, and that first bit of this plowing, and then it gets and boating deck on the plane, and so you ride over that, and now the aircraft is now accelerating rapidly, and then that second part is surely then quite quick before you get airborne. The first bit of energy is
not
used
really.
up.
Not necessarily. Well, it can be quick if you've got a little bit of wind to help you, but you know what? As I said, as your speed increases, the drag increases,
Sure.
And so it really wants to keep you down onto the water. When you have a float plane, there's a technique where you actually lift one float out of the water, and you're just on the 1.2.
All right.
So it reduces the drag, and you just fly off the one float.
Okay. All right. Well,
it sounds way more difficult than what it is. I always say to fly a float plane is actually quite easy, but it's not forgiving.
Okay.
So a little ding will sink your airplane.
All right. I know you've got a story about that coming later, and we're going to dive in a bit deeper on Catalina shortly. Okay, so it's quite unconventional to go across. I know a lot of people, particularly South Africans, although we're quite well regarded in the industry around the world, there's almost an urgency or a desire to have a European or an FAA license, and many people do it. But it's quite unconventional to end up in the United States doing your FAA on a seaplane. So I thought that was quite an interesting one. So now you've got your FAA, you've got your seaplane rating, and I suppose through the next couple of years visiting Miami a lot, you're flying there a lot. But then you come back and you're now in Cape Town and close to the Stellenbosch Flying Club, and you start sort of poking your nose around there and getting to know the people of what's happening in your GA back home now.
Okay, so what happened now, this was like late 90s, maybe 96 or thereabouts. And one day I phoned up Pierre Gous, a very good friend of mine, and I said to him, Pierre, what's happened to the Harvards, the skydiving Harvards? I don't see them anymore. And he said, man, let me find out for you. And the two of us put our heads together, and before long we decide, well, this is a nice little project for us. We'll get the skytyping going again, because by that stage, the Harvard Club couldn't pay the bills, and the airplanes were impounded by the maintenance guys at Rand Airport.
Okay.
So I said, no, man, it's not a good idea to impound all 6 of them, because there were 6 skytypers.
Okay.
So release 5 of them. You can hold on to 1, and then we can at least make money with the 5 to pay you off. Otherwise, you're never going to get your money. And so they fell for this. And
sounds like good negotiation. So let's just pause there and describe then what is skytyping. I mean, I think we all have a sense of what it is. You're typing something in the sky. How does it work? How does this play out?
Okay, listen. It'll blow your socks right off. Skytyping is an amazing little product, and I didn't start, really. We just rescued it.
Okay.
It was started in the States, and when the Harvard Club started flying, they thought, well, this is a nifty idea of making some money. And they tried to run it commercially, and I don't think it was all that successful, because there were all sorts of politics once again, But when Pierre and I stepped in, we realized we're going to just do it for the love of the show. We're just going to do it for the love. So what skytyping is this. Imagine a dot matrix printer. If you remember dot matrix printer from when you were still young and beautiful. Anyway, so it's a printer that prints with dot matrix. 9 is the sort of ideal number of dots. That's why it was called a 9-dot matrix printer.
Okay.
So, but for us, the minimum amount of dots that you can use is 5. So if you can imagine, if you want to print the letter E, you need 2 aeroplanes on the outside to make the long legs of the E, 1 in the middle, the short legs, and another 2 aeroplanes just to keep the space and to basically make the vertical line of the E.
Sure. So each dot is an airplane in your description.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we fly these 5 airplanes in formation. So we worked out that we need the airplanes 50 meters apart.
Okay.
So figure that, so you're flying a formation, a line abreast formation, but 50 meters apart.
Wow.
That is, yeah. And we fly it in a slight curve because you have to, you paint your word, you're going to type your word like in a curve around the stadium or the beach or wherever you're going to type.
Okay.
So now we've got these 5 airplanes, and it was 5 Harvards. So what do we need? We need a laptop. Okay, just a laptop so you can type the word.
Yeah.
And now that message from the laptop needs to be sent to a printer port. So we made a printer port on the airplane. And
a laptop and a Harvard doesn't always go together in the same sentence.
No, it doesn't. And so when you write your little word, Alex McPhail or Nashua, or whatever you want to type, and you press enter, your airplanes need to be in the correct position and to start the first typing, the first letter. And now what happens, and this is the rest of the hardware that you need. So from that printer, there must be a little sender, there must be a transmitter from the lead airplane that carries the computer.
Okay.
And that airplane sends a message to these 5 solenoids, one on each airplane, that will open a oil valve that will put a metered amount of oil onto the exhaust of each airplane, and that will create a dot. It's actually very, very simple. So you've got 1 transmitter, 5 receivers. Each airplane will have a receiver, and the computer works out to send a signal to which airplane to open which port. So really, just like a dot matrix printer.
Okay.
And it's fantastic.
And it worked, and you did that for a while. So that sounds very interesting and unusual. It's not something that you see much anymore either. But that got you kind of stuck in there at the Harvard Club, and because people saw you doing kind of unusual things, more unusual things started coming your way. So what was going on there at that time? I know at the time you weren't yet an instructor, but people were asking you because you were involved in something strange. I've got this other something strange, and can you help out?
Yeah, well, you see, what happened there is, so now people would come to me and say, listen, would you help me with a forced landing procedure, or would you help me with a whatever in the airplanes, and would you do a PPL test for me? And I said, dude, I can't do that. I'm not an instructor. They said, what? You're not an instructor. You've got 8,500 flying hours. You fly jumbo jets. You fly Harvards and all sorts of bits and pieces. But why can't you help me? I said, no, man, I still don't even know how to fly myself. And another thing that happened was, I told you about this. Ralph Garlick bought a MiG-15 in the UK. Okay. And him and his partner in crime, James Craven, Doc Craven's son. And the two of them had this MiG-15 in the UK. But it was a very, very difficult airplane to operate. It was temperamental and so on. So they decided, you know what, they're going to give that up and they're going to buy a Strike Master. And they brought this Strike Master and flew it through Africa down to Cape Town.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And when they landed in Stellenbosch, I happened to see them struggling with the ejection seat with the straps and stuff. So I went over to help them. And so we struck up a friendship. And he said, listen, I need you to get your instructor's rating so that you can help us fly this machine. Anyway, so that was the story. And
so then you started flying Strike Masters. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. It's very similar to an Impala, really.
Okay.
It had a different mark of the same Viper engine,
Okay.
So I started flying those, and but the big thing was then that I really needed to help the guys with their little airplanes at Stellenbosch. So I thought, let me do an instructor's rating.
Okay.
Get myself an instructor's qualification, and I got this, and that was. Well, yeah, I was an instructor before, and this was a new thing for me. But I really, really enjoyed it. And you know what I've learned? One of the things that really stand out for me is that, we always thought there's no 150 or there's no 172, and you'll pull your nose up at a thing like that. Those airplanes are absolutely brilliant. They are so fantastic, and it is such a pleasure to fly them.
Sure.
And what great machines and great tools they are. But we were just never exposed to it, and so a whole new world opened up to me.
Yeah.
In that.
Anyway. It's an interesting thing, this going down a whole new avenue. And what I find very interesting when you told me the story earlier was that this wasn't something that you'd thought up, but under the urgence and suggestion of your friends and colleagues, you thought, okay, well, I'll give it a go. So that's quite fascinating.
Yeah. And I'll tell you another thing. You had to have 70% to pass, and there were 2 subjects, and I had 70% for each of them. So I just made it.
Well, we'll come back to instruction again just now. But
nothing special there.
When you so now you're getting a bit more evolved and a bit more established, and then I'm going to flash up this picture here, and this is the CB. On this lake there, looks like it's gaining a bit of speed there. I can't quite tell. Maybe it's just getting onto the step now. So tell us a bit how the CB came into the picture there. Now you've been flying on and off seaplanes for a while. So how does the CB fit in?
Yeah, so Brenton de la Harpe, you guys might know him. He's with Cathay, lovely guy. He bought the CB. This was a dream for him to have the CB and to operate it out of the waterfront. I didn't think it was going to work, but anyway, he convinced a couple of friends to buy into this thing with him, and eventually they got the thing going. But then it was just at the time that he was leaving for Cathay, for Hong Kong, so he needed somebody to just run with it a little bit. So I said, yeah, well, okay, I'll help you with that. And because I think they wanted to do a movie. That's right. They wanted to do an ad at Appletizer's Dam, and the airplane had to be ready. And it was like, they were really gunning to get the airy going. And then they, right on the day that we had to fly the airplane out, it was windy like you can't believe it. And we taxied out. And it was a terrible day for the first flight in this airplane. I've never flown one before. I just flew it on my test pilot's rating. So, and I got to the runway and we did the run up, and it was making the most horrific noises. And I so wanted to fly, but eventually we turned back and we came back, and I said to Dudley Laveau, the guy that was the technician, I said, man, there's something not right with this engine. And he said, he went and he took it and he opened it, he did a power check on it, and the gearbox blew. Anyway.
Good decision.
So we put that airplane on a low bed, took it up Salori's Pass, stuck it on the dam, and the whole movie's plan was a little bit changed, but the airplane was there, but it was just stationary.
Okay, well, where there's a will, there's a way. You made it work.
No, I didn't. No, I can take no credit for that.
All right, and then so now you've been flying seaplanes for a while now, and now also with the CB, you start getting involved in all sorts of other things. But before we get to the sort of movies and things, tell me about how you start to get involved in a Catalina. Where does that sort of story start for you?
Okay, have you got time?
I got time.
Okay, let me tell you. So in about I would say either early '99 or end of '98 thereabouts, I get a phone call from a guy, a Spaniard. His name is George Suarez. And he says to me, he tracked me down. I don't know how or what was the reason why he got hold of me, but he said he's got a proposition. There are 3 Catalinas in Portugal, and they do firefighting in their summer. Yep. And he reckons that we need them in our summer. So let's fly them down to Cape Town every summer and do the firefighting. Now, I quickly did the maths, and I said, no, this is not going to work. I mean, it's 50 hours ferry, each Catalina, to just get them down to the fire season. And then, no, I didn't think it was going to work. But anyway, he asked me to look into it, so I went to the Air Force, because I had good comms with the Air Force at the time, because there was really the pilots that were doing the skytyping for me, a lot of those guys. And so the Air Force guy said, you know what, it's not really our job to do firefighting. It's these civilian contractors that will do it. We're just there to help if we really have to. And with the sums, it just wouldn't work, So I phoned old George Suarez, and I said to him, listen, it's not going to work. This is not going to work. A year later, I'm sitting on my stoep. I used to live in Stellenbosch, and you can't believe the fires. The whole Cape is burning. That is 99, 2000.
Those big fires, I remember that. I was living there too, sure.
Said, we really need to do something about this. And I thought, wait a bit. Let me phone George Suarez and ask if that Catalinas is still available. Yeah. He says, they for sale. Okay. So he said, oh, great. So then I phoned up my brother, fantastic guy, my brother, and we started dreaming. And before long, we went to Portugal to go and have a look at these airplanes, because we said, no, let's go and have a look at them first, because maybe they buckets or bolts, Yeah. But they were beautiful. They were, beautiful 70-year-old airplanes. And we thought, well, let's see if we can buy them. But we had one constraint, and that is that we didn't have money.
Just that little constraint, that's all.
Yeah. So we're going to buy 3 Catalinas, but we ain't got no money.
All right.
And so we went down and we tried to get sponsors, and the idea was to brand them, and to make them there was a number of big organizations that were very keen at the time. The government was also very keen at the time, but I don't think they could get their minds around these old airplanes flying in their fire season, and for them to invest
so much money
into an organization like that. But what then happened was I don't know how, but Canada, Bombardier heard about us, and they phoned my brother and I up, and they flew us into Montreal.
Okay.
And they stuck us on a Learjet, and we flew to Ontario, to North Bay, Ontario, and did a nice flight in a Canada 215 there on the lakes.
Oh, wow.
That was April 2000, trying to sell us
firebombers.
Firebombers.
So you'd created enough of a buzz about yourselves and your story with the Catalinas, and you'd created such a presence that people thought, this is the real deal. Let's get straight to the source, and we'll sell them
was the real deal.
we'll sell them new airplanes. We don't know that they have no money, but good for you.
It was the real deal, but those airplanes are wickedly expensive, and we couldn't. You know what?
Yeah.
We didn't pull it off. And the funny thing is, now when we came back from Portugal after having looked at the airplanes, and they were beautiful.
Oh.
You know what? The fires were out. And very quickly, the people forgot about it, and they said, well,
the impetus
we
is
don't
gone
really
now.
need that. Yeah, exactly. We lost the impetus. But that project kept on for about 18 months. And when their fire season started, I actually went to Portugal, and I flew, and I did some firebombing with them.
Okay.
And if I say I did firebombing, there's a little bit of license to that.
Sure.
So it's a real specialist job. So I did some flying, but
you're part of a crew.
I stood with big eyes behind these guys.
Okay, great. And I want to just start zooming in there a little bit. So there's a picture that you've taken, and I think this is the Canada. You've taken some great photos. I can see by the photos that you shared with me that your time in Portugal was amazing, and you've got and this plays out to how I experienced dealing with you, in a work context, learning, being a friend, a colleague. The meticulous attention to detail. You've got these photos, and you've taken these notes such that you can look at your pictures again and remind yourself, or should you have got this Catalina deal going, there's some details and some almost instructor notes here. So I love what you've written here. It says, difficult to judge height above glassy water, and there you can see that yellow pontoon there on the end, and then the picture below it has touchdown with the spray everywhere. So tell us a little bit about this. You're in Portugal now, and you're doing some water landing. So a bit about the airplane, a bit about Portugal, and a bit about height over water, etc.
Right. So first of all, let me just correct you. That is not a Catalina. That's a Canada 215.
Okay.
So it's also got big radial engines. In fact, it's got those R2800 Pratt & Whitneys. So 2,800 cubic inches per engine, 2,100 horses a side. It's massive, and it's really wonderful engines. And that airplane was purpose-built firebomber. It was built around the water tanks. And You know what? It's a long time ago. It's 20 years ago. But I think on one of the photos you showed me and you read, it said 5,300 liters.
Yeah.
So that was the capacity of the Canadair 215. Now the next version of it, the 415, was a turbine aeroplane. That they upped it a little bit. But so those ones were just, we couldn't even reach. But it was an off chance that we could get 215, second-hand 215s with the radial engines. Sorry, your question was...
Okay, so you're right. So, you go to Portugal. Okay.
Right. No, that actual picture was not taken in Portugal. That was in Canada. That was on North Bay, in North Bay, Ontario.
Oh, wonderful.
With the Canadair airplane. And so those two pictures. And yes, it was April. There was still some ice on the lakes. So we had to pick a fine spot between the ice sheets to scoop the water, and then there was a little island, and we bombed the island with the water.
The practice run. Okay, while you're talking about that, let's talk. So you don't load up this thing full of water. You actually scoop as you go. Well, how does that principle work for bombing?
Yeah, you listen. You can load it up, because you'll see on the side it will have a big, like a pressure refueling point where you just can force water in there. But you're not going to do that, because really this thing is massively efficient because it can scoop on the go. Okay. So underneath each water tank, literally, if you can imagine the size of my hands now, this is the size of a scoop underneath each of these water tanks. I'm talking Canadair, not talking Catalina. And you can have the scoop open as you land, because it's a little drag, but it's not massive drag, and it won't break off. So you land, and as you touch down, as those scoops go into the water, and it's not a massive scoop, it's this size. Yeah. The ram effect of the water, it just pushes into that tank, and it just fills up the tank from below. And I explained to you before that it can't overfill, because under the armpits of the airplane, you can imagine, there's a big hole. So as these tanks fill up, they just fill up, and the excess water will spout out underneath the armpits. Okay. So some of these pictures, if you look carefully, you'll see the water coming out under the wing roots. Anyway, so within 12 seconds on a Canadair, you will fill those water tanks. So you literally touch down on the water. As you feel the drag, you'll add a little bit of power, and you will, very soon, those gauges just go whoop, 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 and they're full. Okay. And you just add power, retract the little scoops, you close them up, and the aeroplane will release you. The water will release you, because you've got so much less drag, and you just fly off. Okay. Beautiful.
So it's quite a slick operation.
Now you're five and a half tons heavier than what you were 12 seconds before.
So it's quite a dynamic operation. And then again, later you're going to be dumping, and you will end up 5 tons lighter again.
Exactly.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Okay. So So let me put up another pictures, and then we can talk a bit more about the firebombing. So here's another. I love your notes here, Gideon. That's great. Once the attack profile and escape route is decided, the firebomber will move in to release its load. In this case, again with the Canadair, 5,300 liters of water and retardant. And there's a picture of going right over the fire, and there's just a spray coming along there. So so that's that instant now where you've obviously you're pitching away from the fire, but you helped with this 5-ton release of load. Does it just all go in one click?
Well, you can decide how you want to do it on the Canadair. Let me think about it. I have to rack my mind now about let's talk Canadair first.
Okay.
So this one, it's got 2 bomb doors, one under each tank. Okay. And you can select whether you want them to open at the same time. It's called in salvo, or if you want to drop them one and then the other one, it's called in train. Okay. If you can drop the water in train. So you can decide whether you want a wide patch of water or a long patch of water. Or what you can do is you can just open one door and then come back and open the other door on the second attack, sure. Depending on the size of your fire or lots of things. Yeah. So on your control column, you will have an arm switch where you arm the door, the bomb doors, and one push on the button will then open the door depending on how you selected it.
Okay.
But you want to have that armed when you're flying into the fire, even if your run is not good. Because if you need to release that water to get light,
Sure.
to get out, you want to do that.
It's quite a dangerous occupation, this firebombing. You're going low, there's often terrain around you. I mean, you don't have much control how you run over the fire. You kind of got to run along a safety aspect of the fire, and whatever escape routes there are, that's what you got to deal with. And then you got the thermals, the smoke, the visibility.
Absolutely. You can see nothing. It's like, it's hot, it smells. It's quite scary. A turbulence in there. And that's why you want to check out your run. Because you want to make sure, because you're going to go into that fire, into that smoke, and you want to make sure that there is a way out.
Yeah.
You don't want to go towards a rocky outcrop and then leave it a little bit late.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's just play a little video here of the Catalina now. This is a Dutch crowd with a splash and go. They flew in formation, and there's a GoPro attached to the pontoon at the end there, and showing the touch and go there.
So I can't see the movie, but
so there it's
I have seen it.
Bouncing along there, and this first airplane gets airborne. And there you can see now the pilot on the left is flying with a control wheel, and the other pilot is controlling the thrust at the sort of landing and takeoff phase. We'll get back to that in a minute. And now we've got the other airplane coming in. And the trim wheel is above his head.
10 voet. 78 knopen, 100 voet per minuut. 4 voet, 74 knopen. Level.
And I love what's coming now. So there's about another minute, but there you can see it, looking out the side, there's just water spraying everywhere. It's at times splashing the underside of the wing in that slowdown phase. And again, now on the takeoff run, it's on the windscreen. The windscreen wipers are going. There's a spray. I mean, that's meters up in the air. Again, reference to these videos are all available on the show description. And again, co-pilot is running the thrust and the mixtures and
the prop
levers, and the trim wheel above your head. Okay, so talk us through the Catalina a little bit now, particularly the water and the bombing.
So you'll find that most of these seaplanes have got the throttle quadrant in the roof, and the reason for that is that you can have access to the bow. So you need to be able to get into the bow of this aeroplane so that you can maybe tie it on when you're mooring somewhere.
Okay, makes sense.
So that's why they really not normally on the pedestal like they are with a conventional airplane. Now, having said that, the 215 is like that. It is on the pedestal. But I can't remember if there was really access to the bow on that machine. But because it's a purpose-built firebomber.
Sure.
But the Catalina was definitely, it was a patrol bomber, and there was also a gunner that needed to be up front, you know that, and so on, and the bomb aimer and all sorts of things like that. So, but the reason why Mr. Co-Pilot has got his hands on the thrust lever, it's not really to set the thrust, it's just to hold the thrust levers there, or the throttles actually I should call them. Because they're vibrating like you cannot believe.
Okay.
And they will vibrate closed if you don't hold them there.
Okay.
So the thrust, and he will have a very specific thrust setting.
Sure.
Which I unfortunately can't remember. But let's say it's 45 inches of manifold pressure that you need to keep for the takeoff run, and 2,700 RPM on the prop levers, and then. You can hear that there's quite a bit of conversation now. What on that Dutch Catalina, what is very different is that they've got good comms, because it's so noisy with those two engines right here. You're sitting in between those two engines, and normally old headsets. It's just not.
It's an old
good
airplane.
enough.
Yeah.
It's old, man. And so you can, even with hand signals, often there will be an SOP where you say, okay, I need the first power reduction. So you'll take takeoff thrust, and then you'll have climb thrust, and you'll have METO power or whatever it was. I can't remember the details of it, Alex.
Okay, we'll forgive you for that. 20 years is a long time, but it sounds like
an interesting thing.
Let me
tell you an interesting thing. So where are the mixtures? So you see that there are those the two throttle levers and the two prop levers. Where are the mixtures?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So the mixtures used to live with a flight engineer that sat in the wing root.
Oh.
So he sat between the two engines, right there in that little parasol of the wing.
Okay.
And he had the levers there. And then the captain had a telegraph. So really he had those string of switches in front of him. I don't think you've got a picture of that.
No.
The captain will say, mixtures auto reach. And then a little light will go on in the engineer station. And he'll say, oh, mixtures auto reach. The captain will, and he'll set them to auto reach, and he'll switch the light off, and the captain will say, oh, my mixtures are now auto reach, let's go. That type of thing. So it was really, really old fashioned. Now for firebombing, they only needed 2 pilots, because otherwise you have to pay 3 people.
Sure.
So they took all those gadgets and levers and stuff from out the wing root, and it actually sits behind the co-pilot. So you can't see it from that position. But if the co-pilot will turn around, he would be able to set the mixtures.
Okay, so that becomes the co-pilot's job, to set mixtures.
Well, yeah, it's a team, So I would imagine it would be the co-pilot's job, but it's pretty straightforward. It's like a Dakota, You've got auto reach, auto lean.
Sure.
You don't really fiddle with the mixtures like you do with some aeroplanes.
Okay, so I could sense through the pictures that you sent me and the notes that you'd made that it was a really enjoyable time there. It was about a week, intense flying every day, all day, jumping in different types, and just really getting stuck in there. By the end of this, was it already the case that the Catalina proposal was over and you were just now helping out a bit later?
No, not at all. No. So we decided that the project isn't dead until it's dead. Okay, so we're going to keep on running with it. And what I didn't tell you is these 3 aeroplanes were Chilean registered. Okay, so they were Chilean registered aeroplanes flying in Portugal. With Chilean captains, Portuguese co-pilots.
Wow.
Because in Chile they speak Spanish.
Sure.
And yes, it's closely related, but still, if you want to speak to a Portuguese firefighter on the ground, you need somebody that can speak Portuguese.
Okay.
So that's why the co-pilots were Portuguese. And the co-pilots were from this company Aero Condor in Portugal, and the captains came with the aeroplanes.
Okay.
So the captains didn't like me at all, because I was a threat. I was going to take their job away. So they saw me as the guy that's going to potentially put them out of a job, because if we buy the airplanes, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
So they've got this job where they come once a year to Portugal and fight fires for 3 months.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
But and the co-pilots were told, listen, be nice to this guy, I might buy our airplane.
There's always that sort of back behind the scene thing going on there.
Yeah.
But I want to put this other picture up. Sorry, carry on.
Now, we'd every morning we would pre-flight those airplanes and warm the oil.
Okay.
And it's got 45 gallons of oil on each engine.
Yes.
At Catalina.
Wow.
It's amazing, because it's designed to fly for days. Well, not really days, but it's a good
story. Long time. I want to put this picture up quickly, and then you can carry on there. So here's a photo. Obviously, towards the end, there's a picture of a young Gideon in the top in the cockpit, and your note says, "I suppose every adventure has to end sometime. This one must rate as one of the finest experiences I've ever had, a true highlight." And in true Gideon style, the meticulous attention to detail, I can see your eyes lighting up as you're telling me the story now, and I'm sure you're reliving the moment, as it were. Tell us about how you rounded out this trip and your relationship ongoing with this crew.
Okay, so now see, that Catalina is a black one.
Yeah.
So that's a different Catalina. So I was very, very fortunate that I flew not only the 3 Catalinas in Portugal, I also flew this one with Charlie Clements. Now, he was a guy like you and I, a Delta pilot, but he called himself, he said, I'm not RD. So I said, what's RD? He says, Real Delta. He was not a Real Delta. He was in one of those airlines that was bought by Delta, and he happened to get onto the seniority list.
All right.
But a lovely guy, lovely guy. So he, on an auction, he bought that Catalina. And they said, okay, well done. Now, you know what, we'll throw in a Dakota as well. So he had that, trust me, that's the truth. And he had those 2 aeroplanes, that Catalina with big Wright Cyclone engines, R2600 Wright Cyclones. Now, normally a Catalina will have 1830 engine, which is the same as a DAC. Okay. It's just a different mark. I think a DAC has got a Dash 92 and this one has got a Dash 94. But anyway, so the Wright Cyclone engine was just a 9-cylinder. Okay. So single bank, but 1,750 horses. That's a monster. Yeah. And funny enough, his DAC was a Navy DAC and it had the same engines.
Oh, okay.
And, yeah. And they had, at some stage, they had an engine failure on the DAC. So the time that I met Charlie Clements, he by the way, he's passed away now. He's quite a bit older than me, and eventually he got some disease, and I missed out on that last bit of his life. Unfortunately, we lost contact. But anyway, so because the DAC was just parked there next to the Catalina, and they kept the rum inside this DAC. They called it the aluminium room. Isn't it beautiful? And every night we would sit under the wing of that aeroplane and drink his Mount Gay rum and nice. Just tell stories. It was just a fantastic time. So I met this guy, and I flew his Catalina a number of times, and that's why I think at the end when I left Miami this was 2004. I knew that this was the end of the Catalina. Okay.
There was other things that were on the horizon. And Gideon, we've got so many pictures and so many stories. We could carry on all night here. So let me say great stories on the Catalina. But there are 2 other things that I do want to talk about before we sign off. So now you've done a whole experience of seaplanes. You are significantly experienced in seaplanes, and probably the most hours of seaplanes in the country as it stands today. Certainly when people talk about seaplanes, your name comes up very quickly. But that's not all. So now I'm going to flash up this picture here, and I'm calling it Spitfire 1. And this beautiful, beautiful aeroplane is in the sunshine on the green fields. I presume it's in England. Tell us the story about this looks like H099, this Spitfire.
Okay. How much time do we have, Alex?
You talk as much as you like. You carry on.
Right. So this Spitfire, in its first life, was a 4-squadron Spitfire. Okay. And in my first life, I was also a 4-squadron dude.
Is it the same 4-squadron?
Same 4-squadron.
Oh, wow.
Air Force, SAF, yeah.
SAF, okay.
But this... okay, let me start at the beginning of the story, where a bloke by the name of Peter Taplin comes to me. He's an Englishman, and he says, I am looking for someone that can teach me how to fly a Harvard, because I bought a Harvard project, and I'm building the Harvard project because I've got a Hurricane project that I want to build.
Okay.
And so the Harvard will be the stepping stone onto this type of thing, because he's got chipmunks on that type of stuff in his license. So I've got the Harvard Club Harvard. So I said to him, okay, I'll tell you what, this is a true story. Because it's not my aeroplane, and because it belongs to the people of South Africa, I am going to teach you on it, but I'm going to rip you off. It's going to be expensive for you. Okay, do you understand that? He says, yeah, I understand it. And I went to the Harvard Club in Pretoria, and I cleared it with him and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to squeeze every buck that we can out of this Englishman. and you know what? It was open. It was otherwise we couldn't have done it. Yeah.
Sure.
So I said to him, you'll never fly this Harvard solo, but I'll give you the best training that I can. So off we went, and we did the training there at Visante Kraal, and after a while he was very, very happy, and he went back home to England, and I kept contact with him. In fact, he bought a house in Cape Town.
Okay.
Yeah. So then Peter Taplin met up with another gentleman that had a project Spitfire, and this was the Spitfire. But it was a single-seater. And this gentleman goes by the name of Paul Pertelli, and he was into tiles, and he was an Italian guy, but he's living, well, of Italian heritage, but he's also an Englishman. And Paul Pertelli teamed up with Peter Taplin, and he said, okay, let's throw all our toys in the same basket and we'll play with it when it's done. And after a while, they got the Harvard going. Man, and they were so happy to get the Harvard going. And the first time they went flying in it, and there was an instructor at White Waltham in England, and the instructor took them up, and in the top of the loop, they ended up in a spin.
Oh.
And the next time the same thing, and the next time the same thing. And they thought there's something wrong with the airplane.
Okay.
But there was nothing wrong with the airplane. But the instructor was just a bit special guy. So it's a very different machine.
Sure.
And somehow, I don't know why, Peter Taplin said, you know what, let's get Gideon in. And he got me, and I said to Pierre, listen, why don't you go with me? So we went there, and we taught them how to fly their own Harvard in England at White Waltham.
Oh, wonderful.
And when we left, Paul Pertelli said to me, you know what, when the Spitfire is finished, you'll come and fly it.
Oh.
I said, what I didn't tell you is that in the meantime, Paul realized that he was never going to fly that thing solo. He was never going to fly it. So he said, let's convert it into a two-seater.
Okay.
And that's when they made it into a two-seater. So I was a little bit disappointed that they make it into a two-seater. But he said, it adds to the value. Because now suddenly you can fly it with someone. You can share the experience. And that's why the airplane is in that colors, because it's a Dutch color scheme, and the Dutch had two of them, number 98 and number 99.
Okay.
So that's why that is number 99. Okay, and that is an official Vickers modification to have that airplane as a two-seater.
Okay. All right.
So the story goes on, and about a month or two later, or 6 months, or I don't know how many months, I hear news. Paul Pertelli has got cancer, and he's got 6 months to live. And sadly, within 2 weeks, he was dead.
Oh.
And so that was it. And probably 2 years later, Peter Taplin phoned me and he said, listen, we've got that airplane, we have to sell it for the estate, but we've got 25 hours.
Okay.
Paul said that he wants you to fly it. So after Paul was dead, he honored that commitment to me, and I went to London to fly that airplane.
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
And
that was another highlight.
There's a picture of you with a grin ear to ear in the back seat of this Spitfire. In your
you better believe it.
That's a happy day.
That was fantastic. That experience is full body. You smell it, you hear it, you touch it, you look at it. It's just absolutely brilliant, that aeroplane.
Okay, so
that was a total highlight.
If I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that everyone should have an attempt to go flying in a Spitfire.
Yeah. but it's big bucks, eh?
Yeah,
it's really big bucks to fly that thing. But it's wonderful. In fact, it was for free for me. Sure. But it was, otherwise I would never have been able to afford it. But it was so special.
Yeah, it's
really
wonderful.
Nice.
Gideon, it was special talking to you. It has been an absolute highlight for me too. I've got so much more to talk about, but I think we're going to leave it on that high note with Spitfires and full body experiences. It's just amazing. You've been a wonderful friend. You've been a wonderful mentor and a big brother to me in so many ways. I really appreciate your time today. I know you were a little bit hesitant to share your story online with everybody, but testament to all these quotes, these comments that have come through. There's just people saying great show and well done and love the detail and wow, awesome. So Gideon, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Before you run off, Can I just say hi to the 43 air school guys? You said that they checking in.
Go for it, yeah.
So there you go. Hello, guys. I wish you can have just as fantastic a career as what I've had. And another one is that Francois Leroux said to me, I must not forget to say hello to him. So hello, Francois.
Francois was the captain on the freighter as well, and that was the story that we're going to dig into in part 2 of this conversation. Gideon,
oh my goodness.
It's a wonderful privilege, and what I really enjoy about these conversations that's been happening is that I get to share like a very interesting part. You know, people often look at airline pilots or pilots in general that spend a lot of time flying, and they say, well, that's a pilot, they fly airplanes. But there's such a broad facet to people's lives, and you could dive in. You know, we've talked a long time about float planes. I've spoken to people about helicopters and fighters and formation and landing on ships, and there's almost no end to the possibilities. So for those of you who are listening who are in the early days, you know, take the stories that you hear here. But for people like Gideon, you know, what's out there is broad and diverse. And I'll sign off with this. Gideon was urged by people to become an instructor such that he could help them in their little airplanes. But I quote some of my colleagues and friends that are in the airline, Gideon is the finest instructor at South African Airways. So how's that for coming from someone else said, hey Gideon, why don't you become an instructor, and rounds off to being one of those top instructors. So Gideon, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for this series. I think it's going somewhere. Well done. And thanks for everybody listening in.
Cheers.
All the viewers. Cheers.
So, folks, thank you so much for joining. Please, if you've enjoyed the show, just subscribe, share, like, write a comment in it as well. I appreciate your support, and we're trying to do some more big, exciting things. As always, I'm going to strive to bring you a show every weekday, so stay tuned for more, and stay safe out there.